Welcome to Talkin SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analysts around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Talking SEC. I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last One College Football and 96.9 Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer for Reservoirs Football. Got a fun show planned for you guys today. I'm going to be joined by Matt Murschel. He is the National College Football writer for the Orlando Sentinel, and we're going to talk about the SEC Championship game, and we'll look at the college football rankings. Then I'll be joined by my colleague over at Last One College Football, Kevin McGuffey, where we'll get Kevin's thoughts on the college football playoff rankings, and we will go through every single SEC bowl game. So, jam-packed show. We're going over an hour here on the podcast, which I told you guys last week you'll start seeing because only doing one podcast a week, but with multiple guests every single week. Before I start our conversation with Matt, I'll let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. You can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the show on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. Of course, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Now, let's talk some college football. Let's talk some SEC, starting off with Matt Murschel from the Orlando Sentinel. Everybody, my first guest this week is Matt Murschel. He is the national college football writer for the Orlando Sentinel, and you check him out on their podcast, the College Gridiron 365. And Matt, I do appreciate you taking time out coming on the show this week.
No problem. It's a good time. There's a lot of things going on in football right now. So.
You know, we've podcasted before, and I seem to bring you on when college football world is on fire because I believe when I had you on back before the season, it's when the Big Ten was about to cancel their season and expected the SEC and everybody else to do the same. So it's always good. It's good to have you on the podcast again. Good to talk college football with you. And it's look, I'm in Alabama, so you know the news going on. I'm dealing with on a daily basis here with Auburn, and then everything would go into college football playoffs. So the regular season, college football season has ended, but there is so much stuff we still have to talk about.
For sure. I mean, we got bowl games. You got the semifinal playoffs. You've got all that which is going on. So I think there's more than enough after what happened on Sunday night. Believe me, we've got the backlash from the selection committee and all that, and I think it's interesting to see, and I think it'll be something I think will be far-reaching than not just for this season, but for the next coming season as well.
You know, and looking on Saturday night with the SEC Championship game, and that feels like that was a month ago already. I mean, what happened between Florida and Alabama, and that was just a one-of-a-kind game. And I think the biggest thing I took from it, we'll talk about the rankings too and where everybody fell and who are the 4 teams in the playoff. But coming out of that game with Alabama and Florida, which I think Dan Mullen made some mistakes in that game, particularly toward the end with some usage of some timeouts. But what I take away from that game, I'd be interested what you take away from it too as well. Alabama is not this flawless, unbeatable team. Yes, you're going to get in a shootout with them like Florida did, but there's teams ahead of them. I don't think Notre Dame can do it, but maybe like a Clemson or Ohio State with their offenses. So Alabama is beatable, but you just got to get them in one of them kind of games.
Yeah, I would agree with you there totally. I mean, listen, their defense, their offense has been as impressive as ever when you look at what they've been able to do, put up points. But when you look at their defense, I mean, their secondary was torched. I mean, you saw Kyle Trask able to take advantage of some of the one matchups. They were able to take deep shots most of the game. That was what I think I tweeted out, the game. If I'm Florida, that's all I'm doing, taking deep shots down the field. I'm putting pressure on their corners. I'm putting pressure on their safeties because they weren't able to find a way to stop some of those guys. And I think that's a concern because there are some teams that, listen, of all the teams in the semifinals, I don't think there's anyone with an offense like Florida, but I think there are teams that could take advantage of, maybe some big plays, like a Trevor Lawrence, maybe a Justin Fields can find the ball down the field. That's not really Notre Dame's forte is taking shots over and over again, deep balls. But, again, if you can find a way to get some points on the board defensively, maybe then you can turn around and pin your ears back and you're able to kind of go after, Mac Jones, or you're maybe try to slow down Najee Harris. I mean, it's such a multi-dimensional offensive attack. It's hard, and teams haven't obviously been able to do it this year. So they're not the perfect Alabama team, but they're definitely opportunities for other teams maybe to take some shots and to get some points as well.
You know, and watching that game Saturday night, like I said, I kind of alluded to it a second ago. When Florida went for 2 at the end, I didn't understand the reason behind that, because you kick the extra point, you're down by 7, and then you had to burn a timeout to come up with the play. I mean, and I know, it's all thing hindsight's 20/20, Monday morning quarterbacking and all that good stuff. But Dan Mullen kind of cost them there, because then without that extra timeout, they may have could have got the ball with extra time. There's some decision making with Dan Mullen in that game that kind of had me scratching my head a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, especially time-wise, I felt like their time management wasn't very good throughout the game. I think when you're down and you're trying to find a way to get back in this type of game, the idea that you eat up so much clock. I mean, you think about when they got down, late in that game, and they go to score the points, and instead of eating maybe some clock up because you're trying to, keep Alabama from scoring, they just didn't make good decisions. And I don't know if that's just Dan, maybe trying to, out-coach himself. I know sometimes in certain situations, coaches love to go to their, their little sheet that tells them, what to do in that situation. But I agree with you. I mean, why not kick the extra point, get it, and then save that timeout, and then you never know what's going to happen. I mean, maybe you get an opportunity, maybe you get something in there that maybe can turn the tide of things. But I also felt like, Florida missed opportunities throughout this whole game. I mean, they had chances where they stopped Alabama, on 3rd down, and then would have a stupid bonehead penalty that would give them an automatic first down and let Alabama go down and then eventually score on that drive. We saw that a couple times. Just weren't as sharp as they need to be. And when you're playing a team like Alabama, you can't make those kind of mental mistakes. You've got to be as crisp and as clean as you can, and you got to find a way to stop guys. Florida's defense was nowhere near up to the challenge, and obviously that's why Najee Harris was able to run free for 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, and looking back at even early on in the game, the missed opportunity when they got the interception, but then John Minchie decided to be a safety and knock the ball out, got the ball loose there. And because that could have been big for Florida, because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering the game, but it was 7-7. Florida takes that, goes down, they go up 14-7. It could be a different game, because then you're in the lead, you're kind of controlling things. So that was a pivotal moment in the game as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, they missed out on these opportunities, and that's kind of been the story of Florida's season in a lot of ways. They've had opportunities to do some things, and in the games where they've lost, they just couldn't find a way to get the job done. I mean, listen, let's go back to the LSU game, 2 weeks ago when they stopped LSU, and then Marco Wilson, for some indescribable reason, picks up a shoe and chucks it down the field. I mean, just a bonehead play that cost them, because then LSU was able to take that ball, go down and kick the 57-yard field goal that eventually was the game winner. If you don't do that play, LSU more than likely kicks the ball back to you, and it's still a tied game, and you have an opportunity to go down and maybe win the game. So they're just those kind of plays where Florida's not as sharp as they should be. And this is why Alabama and these teams are in the playoff semifinals right now, because of the fact they don't make those kind of mistakes. They make few of those kind of mistakes. But and that's what cost, I think, Florida in this game against, Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. When you play this Alabama team, you got to almost play a perfect game. I mean, if you make any small mistakes, they will capitalize on it. Alabama did that on Saturday night. It's a championship game, and you mentioned the rankings. Much controversy and people discussing all over Twitter, social media, anywhere. When you look at the 4 teams, of course, Alabama number 1, Clemson 2, Ohio State 3, Notre Dame 4. In your mind, did the committee get it right?
Yeah, I think they did. I thought after the SEC championship Saturday night, I felt like it was going to be these 4 teams. I felt like, Notre Dame deserved to be there, because even though they lost to Clemson and it was a blowout loss, I felt like, listen, they played well all season long. They had a couple of big wins during the year against top 25 teams, against Clemson earlier in the end of the season, and against North Carolina team that was ranked in the top 15 on the last rankings. I felt like they deserved to be there. I felt like Ohio State was going to get in, because of the fact the committee really has stood behind the decision that Ohio State is going to get in no matter what. I mean, we've seen that all season long. They felt like, that they're a good enough team to be there despite only playing 6 games. I felt like if Florida had beaten Alabama, then all bets would have been off. We would have seen some changes That would have helped A&M. That would have helped some other teams as well. To me, the biggest disappointment through all this is the fact that we didn't get to see, a team like Cincinnati, which goes 9-0, and a team that, really deserves a shot probably at getting, to playing for this at some point, isn't going to be able to, because again, the committee is going to look back and say, well, you didn't play a tough enough schedule, and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. We just heard this time and time again. We've seen that with Coastal Carolina this year as well. So I think the committee took a lot of criticism, a lot of heat this year, probably deservedly so, because I think their reasoning just doesn't hold water. And, right now, fans are getting tired of seeing these same teams over and over again in the playoffs. And, they want to get an opportunity, much like in March Madness. They want to see that underdog come in there and maybe get a shot to see what's going to happen. It wasn't going to happen this year. It may not happen again until the selection committee, until the current contract is up in 6 years.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I can already see people get mad if it ends up being Alabama Clemson in the national championship again. And, with that, are you for an expansion of the playoff going to 8, or do you think it's right with just 4?
No, I think it needs to expand. I've thought for a while there, I thought 6 would be a really good number. Again, you go with the 5, Power 5 conference champions. And then you throw in, you throw in a group of 5 champion, the best, highest ranked team. You go that route. I think 8 makes some sense, obviously, because then you can go with the 5 champions, a group of 5 teams, and then you can add maybe 2 wild cards, 2 teams that would have been like a Notre Dame, for instance, which would have been in there because they weren't the conference champions. So you could have thrown them in there as well. I think they'll more than likely go 8. I mean, if that's the scuttle that they're probably talking about. The big thing about expanding is I just don't think it's going to happen. If fans expect it to happen like overnight, it's not going to happen that way. I don't think that this group is just ready to get to that point yet. They've got 6 years left. This was a weird year because of COVID. I don't think that trying to do something in this off season would make much sense. I think they want to wait, but there is in the last couple of years, there's been a growing sentiment that this system isn't working. It's not as perfect as people believe it should have been. And they need to figure out a way to make it more inclusive for some of these teams. I mean, you go 8, think about some of these teams that would be in there. It'd be, Alabama against Cincinnati. Yeah, it may not be a big, attractive matchup, but I think it'd be an interesting game. Maybe Clemson against Florida. I mean, you would see some of these teams that maybe would be interesting matchups. And it's going to have to add a game or 2. We know that's going to happen, but again, I think this is the way college football should end up going.
Yeah, if you had that this year, you look at Alabama and Clemson and their matchups, which Florida and Clemson would be fun, I think, because of the Florida offense. But if you would have Ohio State and Oklahoma in the first round, and we'd have Notre Dame and A&M. So that argument would be settled between those two, who deserves to be 4. But I look at that and I say Ohio State and Oklahoma, because the way Oklahoma's playing right now, I think that'd be dangerous. So you could open up the door with some pretty good, interesting matchups. And you would think with that situation, because you can only ask college football fans to spend so much money, I believe, that first round of games, if they ever do go to 8, would be on campus.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it would probably be on campus. I think it'd be tough because, again, you're asking a fan, unless, for instance, Alabama fan, you're asking him not only to go to the SEC championship game, you'd be asking him to go to a would it be like essentially a quarterfinal game, then into a semifinal game, and then to the national championship, and that's a lot to ask fans to put down money for, and you're not going to get that to happen. So I think if you go to an on-site campus situation, I think then that maybe alleviates some of it. It would have been even better this year because, again, because of COVID, you wouldn't have to worry about going to a neutral site bowl, situation. You would have just done like a regular game. You would have basically had, gone on a Friday and played on a Saturday. But again, one of the reasons that college football has this tradition is they love these bowl situations. They love the Rose Bowl. They love Cotton Bowl. They want to see that kind of traditional game survive. So those would have to end up being still the semifinal games. But I think there's a way to do this. I think there's definitely, and there'll be time to sit down and hammer out all the details so that when they do decide to make this move, it should be a pretty smooth transition.
Look at Texas A&M with them and everything they had. I mean, do you think probably the biggest thing for them is maybe if they had lost a close game to Alabama early in the year, that would have gave them maybe a better chance to jump over Notre Dame with what happened in Notre Dame on Saturday?
Might have been, very much so. I think you could have seen that happen. I think what hurt A&M was Florida losing LSU. I mean, because in a way, that Florida win that just lost a little luster. You know, I mean, it became, okay, well, that was your best win. Well, this team just lost to a, 3-5 LSU team. You know, I think if Florida had dominated LSU, I think, you know, that would have helped Texas A&M's cause. And I just think when you look at their schedule, I mean, you know, it was a solid schedule. And I mean, the only loss was to Alabama. But, you know, again, I think they're looking around and they're saying, okay, who else did you have that was a top 25 program? I mean, that was an unfortunate thing about the SEC this year. You know, yeah, there were some strong teams, but again, you know, A&M didn't have some of those types of games. I mean, you know, they had Alabama, Florida, Arkansas was bad, South Carolina was bad, Tennessee was bad. I mean, there was not a good, you know, by the time they got to Auburn was bad. You know what I mean? So they didn't have any of these major games with a ranked team. So if one of these teams had been better, if Auburn had been better, then maybe you could have really made the case that they deserved to get in there because the SEC was so strong. But I just think when it was all said and done, I think the committee looked at Notre Dame's schedule, said, okay, you played better teams over the last, you know, couple weeks. You played better over the last couple weeks, so we're going to put you in.
Yeah, with the SEC this year, I agree with you because, I mean, you got Alabama, Florida, A&M, and then you've got Georgia. Your top four, those are really good, solid teams. I mean, look, they're all in the top 9 there. But then once you got past the middle of the SEC was not as good this year as it normally is. So I agree with you 100%. So A&M's argument that the SEC was, you know, is so tough, you know, that's kind of, you know, it just means more. It's the best conference, all that stuff. And I still believe that. But when you compare it to other conferences, I don't think the middle of the SEC was so much better than these other conferences. So I think that's probably, you know, I agree with you that that's probably a big thing that hurt their argument too as well, that middle of the conferences was not as good this year.
No, and I think, again, if that had been the case, then you could have made the argument, all right, we're strong and we're going. But then, you know, I think you can – that's the argument I think fans then got upset with Ohio State being where they were, because you look at Ohio State's schedule and you say, well, man, the Big Ten was really bad this year. You know what I mean? The teams that we expected to be good, you know, the Penn States, the Michigans, they were horrible, you know. And yes, you know, Ohio State got a big win against a good Indiana team, but you take away that win – and honestly, you're looking at a schedule, and Northwestern in the championship game, Nebraska wasn't very good. Penn State was bad. Rutgers was bad. Maryland, you know, didn't really even get off the field, so to speak. It was bad. You start to wonder, you know, where were the big quality wins, you know? And I think some of what happened with Ohio State was it was name brand recognition and the Big Ten recognition. So they're lucky. They're very lucky they got in. I mean, I think and I've been saying this for months, if Ohio State didn't qualify for the playoffs, I would consider this season a failure for the Big Ten, because the whole reason they came back is because they felt like Ohio State was a good enough team to play in the playoffs and contend for a national championship. If they didn't get in, then it was all work for nothing.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting with them and Clemson in their playoff game because, I mean, of course, Dabo Swinney, the stuff came out today that, you know, the coaches poll thing, you know, did Dabo really do the voting or somebody else do it for him? But putting Ohio State at 11, some of the comments he made, of course, the way last year's semifinal game ended. I mean, yeah, Alabama, Notre Dame, and look, Notre Dame's going to be a heavy underdog. We know that. But that Ohio State-Clemson game is going to be interesting because there's a lot of things around that game that is going to make that a very intriguing matchup on the first.
Yeah, I think you know, like I said, those are just some interesting, you know, and I think to me, Clemson, Ohio State, the rematch of last year. I think, you know, we know that Trevor Lawrence is playing at that elite level. I want to see what Ohio State can do. I want to see what they can do with the full, you know, with getting some of their players back from COVID protocols. I want to see how they're going to handle this. And then, you know, the Alabama-Notre Dame matchup is, I mean, this is the 2012 rematch, you know, for the BCS championship. And I remember that. I was at that game. And, you know, Notre Dame came in, you know, with this idea that they were going to win that game. They thought they were really good. And Alabama just dominated them, you know, almost ridiculous. And so, you know, I think Notre Dame has a much better team this year than they did at that time. I think their defense is better. But like we talked about earlier on, I don't know if Notre Dame's offense can put up those kind of points like a Florida did. You know, I mean, I don't know if they're going to have that opportunity. They're going to have to rely on their defense to make plays, to get turnovers, to create short fields, and let Ian Book and the running backs kind of take over. They're going to have to almost, and this is something you would be very contrary to this season, they're just going to have to grind out drives. I mean, they can't score two or three plays. They've got to go 10, 11, 12 play drives to kind of keep you know, Alabama's offense off the field. It's going to be a challenge, and I think that's why the line is what it is right now. I think it's at 19.5. So, but again, all four of these teams have a familiarity, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of helps play out.
Yeah, it is. I guess Ian Book is going to have the game of his life against Alabama for this to be interesting. Which, you know what? I've watched him play this year. I think he's capable. I mean, I just don't know, and I'm with you, the style that Notre Dame does like to play, and I'm not too sure that they have the outside receivers that can do that kind of thing to Alabama. But I do believe Ian Book. I mean, I think he's probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks in college football that we don't talk about a lot, because you've got, of course, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Matt Jones, Kyle Trask, so Zach Wilson at BYU. But I do feel like Ian Book's probably one of the more underrated quarterbacks nationally when it comes to college football.
Yeah, I do too. I think he's one of those guys. I mean, and not to take anything away from Mac Jones or from Kyle Trask or Justin Fields. I think Ian Book's a guy who's an old school quarterback. He's a guy that isn't in a system that's going to put up. He's not going to pass for 400 or 500 yards a game. He's not going to. That's not what he does. I think what Notre Dame does really well is they run the football well, and then they mix in the play action, and they allow Ian Book to use his legs to get out and make plays. And they use, what is it? I think Notre Dame's got 3 or 4 really stellar tight ends. I mean, very rarely do the top teams use the tight end position, and they love the tight end position, not just a block, but they love to use it. They got tight ends that are tall and fast and lanky. They can make plays down the field. So Notre Dame used that tight end position well, and they run the ball well. So they're a very old school type, to me, looking team, and they're not going to fit into that let's try to throw the ball 50 or 60 times unless they find themselves down. But even then, I think Brian Kelly is likes what he has with this team, and Ian Book just shows that. I think he's got that grittiness and the personality that he's always going to keep throwing the ball downfield and always going to try to find a way to make the plays, but. They can't get into the shootout with Alabama. They can't get down by 3 touchdowns because they just don't have that kind of ability, I think, to come back and win this type of game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Both matchups. I guess with the season going a little bit longer, lasting deeper into December, we don't have to wait like a month before we see these games. So I guess sure. In a weird way that is a positive with everything. But anyways, Matt, I do appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you taking the time. If the listeners want to follow you online, where can they find you and all your work you're doing over at the Orlando Sentinel?
Well, they can go to OrlandoSentinel.com to read all our stories. They can follow me on Twitter at OS Matt Murschel. And as you mentioned earlier, we got podcasts. College Gridiron 365 podcast that we do every week. We just put up an episode today, fresh with our look at the big picture with the election committee rankings, and got into an interesting debate with my coworker who's an Ohio State fan. So it's always fun to do those kind of things on podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And once again, Matt, I do appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Looking forward to it, and have a happy holidays.
All right, thank you, you too. All right, buddy, my second guest this week on Talking SEC is my colleague over at Last Word on College Football, Kevin McGuffey, where he covers Kentucky Wildcats, and did a fantastic job all season long keeping an update on our bowl projections every week over at Last Word on College Football. And Kevin, as always, I appreciate you taking the time out and coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Phillip. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's glad to be on with you again. And, the whole bowl thing was just, at the end, it was almost like throwing darts or something, but because, every other day it was changing, or somebody, a bowl game wasn't playing, or a team decided they weren't going to play. So, I had like little notebook papers, and, I would have all the games written down, and I'd be like, okay, this team here, and then I would say, okay, or we take, but anyway, I was probably up till the last one that we did that aired, that came out like Sunday morning. I think I finished at like 1 a.m. Because I was waiting on the SEC to finish, the AAC to finish, and then it was just like following Twitter and everything with people saying, okay, this team's opted out now, this team's opted out. So and it just kind of went with it. But yeah, it's fun. I enjoy doing it. Jason Ray, who's another writer at Last Word, and he did it for a couple of years, and then he stopped doing it, and I was like, well, I always thought that was fun, something I wanted to do, so I took the mantle, or however you want to call it, and went with it like that. And so hopefully, I think I said this before, hopefully in another 10 days, 11 days, we'll be into 2021, and hopefully we'll get some semblance of normalcy again and have a normal bowl season. But anyway, like I said, thank you for having me. I always enjoy coming on and talking with you.
Yeah, the bowl season, I mean, not having a normal bowl season has struck me, and it just kind of hit me today with everything because I don't know if you've noticed the last 2 years, I have actually gone to Camellia Bowl up in Montgomery, and I covered it as a photographer. So last year's game showed up in my Facebook memories this morning. So that kind of hit a certain way because, I didn't even attempt to try to get, to go to that one as a photographer because I know that they're so restricted on people on the sidelines and stuff like that. So while I am still writing an article on it this year, it is kind of just hits you a certain way. And so, yeah, and I can imagine, I was thinking about that too, especially the last couple of weeks of the regular season college football when, cause I got my notifications set to that FB Schedules Twitter account where they constantly are updating you on stuff. And it was like every day it felt like 2 or 3 opting out, which it felt like a lot of it was coming from the Pac-12. But I just can't imagine just, kind of how taxing that was this year trying to keep up with that, with all that going on.
Yeah, that's a great website in general and their Twitter page. And then, like I said, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan, but, Brett McMurphy at the stadium, he seemed to be on top of everything for what, this year. And, he was another one to follow. And, he was, like I said, I don't know where he's getting all his information, but he was right, on a lot of it. So, but yeah, like I said, it was interesting. Like I said, I did get at least all the teams. I had all the teams right in the playoff and had all the teams right in the New Year's Six. I may not have had them playing in the right game. So I'll at least sort of a pat on the back for that. But anyway, but yeah, like I said, yeah. And then we had the first bowl game as we were recording this. It was. With Appalachian State beating North Texas, I don't think that was a big shock to anyone that Appalachian State won that game pretty easily. So I was, kind of surprised that North Texas getting even in this crazy season, North Texas at 4-5, out of a smaller conference still getting a bid like that. But anyway, but yeah, like I said, bowl season's here. It's one of my favorite times of year, and I'm ready for it. And we've got a couple, honestly, you and I were talking before we started here, we got a couple of really good ones, I think, coming up here in the next 2 days, at least one's on Tuesday and then another one on the 26th, which I'm probably looking forward to the most of any of them of the early season, especially the early season bowl games.
Yeah, we were talking about that because, like I said, on Tuesday when the show is dropping, you do have the game between Central Florida and BYU, which I hope that thing gets weird and high scoring and everything. I don't like watching bowl games, Kevin, that are like 10-6. Don't give me that mess. Give me 50-53. Something crazy happens, especially in the early bowl games, and I want to see that between Liberty and Coastal Carolina as well early on, and one that we will talk about here in a minute. Too, I want to see out of Florida and Oklahoma. I am going to be curious what that over-under is going to be when we get to that game because I have a feeling when we get to that one, defense is not going to be played. So that is what I want out of my bowl game, especially the non-playoff games.
You don't.
I want high scoring and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I remember there was a couple last year. It was like 10-6 and 14-7. It was like, yeah, I'm kind of like you. This is And then you had, the Wildcats played probably what I think, a lot of people thought was the best bowl game last year. It wasn't just the motto, the Belk Bowl used to call themselves the best bowl, and I think it really was last year with, Kentucky's last-second, last-minute win and everything. But as you said, Central Florida and BYU, I'm really looking forward to that one. And I did, part of our thing with Last Word, everybody chooses a bowl game or two to cover and usually take one of those early season games. I always have been a big fan of the New Orleans Bowl. And for weeks I thought that game was going to be, I had Marshall and Coastal Carolina playing in that game. So I thought that would be a really fun game. And it didn't turn out that way. But Louisiana Tech and Georgia Southern, I think, can be pretty good. It's a pretty good matchup. And when I was doing the research for it, I did not realize that Louisiana Tech actually has the longest current active bowl winning streak in college football. They've won 6 games in a row and looking for 7 on Wednesday when they play Georgia Southern. So I was like, that's kind of cool. Skip Holtz is the coach there. So, like I said, some of these games, like I said, you know, some of us, we just like to watch football no matter what. And then, you know, some of these early games, it's kind of like, okay, why would I want to watch this game? But then, as you said, you know, if you get into it, hopefully something crazy happens, and like I said, 50-48 or something. And then, you know, that makes it, you know, makes those games even more fun. So,
yeah, I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing the last 2 years doing the Camellia Bowl. They both came down to the wire. And I you know, here's something I believe. We need like several bowl games that match the Sun Belt and the MAC, because then you've got Fun Belt versus MACtion, and let's see who wins it.
Mm-hmm.
Because those
right.
two slogans that I love Tuesday and Wednesday night Fun Belt, and we all love the MACtion on Wednesday or Tuesday night. I don't know. That's just a weird thing for me, too. I want to see the Sun Belt and the MAC play more often in these bowl games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And, you know, for, you know, living here in Kentucky, Western Kentucky ended up with a bowl bid. I think it's I was kind of surprised at, too. They ended up, you know, in the Lending Tree Bowl. But, you know, I can remember the days of, you know, when Louisville was in the Big East, you know, like the Big East or even Conference USA before that. You know, they're the ones that kind of started that Tuesday night. You know, hey, you need somebody to put a game on Tuesday night. You know, get the Big East or the Conference USA or somebody. You know, there used to always be some really great games on, and it was great for those programs. So, like, you know, this year with the MAC and playing those Wednesday night games, it's a chance for people to get to see. You know, like we talked about, get to see teams you don't normally. You think about Buffalo and Ball State. You know, both of those teams had really solid years, and you know, I think either one or both could possibly win their bowl games. I think that's another one. Looking down the road while I'm thinking about it, the Ball State San Jose State in the Arizona Bowl, that one has potential to be one of those really good, great games, because I had forgotten about Nick Starkel that, was in the SEC, then transferred. I'd forgotten that he was at San Jose State until I was watching some of that game on Saturday. I was like, oh, that's what happened to him, kind of thing. So that's another one looking ahead on the 31st that I'm pretty excited about too.
Yeah, I saw that. I was watching that a little bit Saturday with the Mountain West championship game. I forgot. Oh, yeah, that's right. Nick Starkel transferred like the 100th time in his college career and and went to San Jose State. I forgot about that, and I saw, that's right, because, of course, everybody, he was at A&M, Arkansas. See, I thought his goal was going to play for everybody in SEC West, but apparently, he decided to go further west and go play at San Jose State.
Auburn. Auburn didn't get the memo, or he didn't get the memo about going to Auburn, right? So.
Well, he knew he had no chance at beating out Bo Nix. I mean, that's just what's going to happen at Auburn. So I just had Auburn.
That's a whole nother. I'll let you. That's a whole nother situation. I'll let you take care of that one. You're the expert on the Auburn on the ongoing saga there. So.
I'll just say this, and I'm going to jump into our main topics here. I am ready for that crap to be over with. My phone is dying really quickly during the day for me checking stuff throughout the day. So I'm just going to say that. So my phone needs it to be over with. That's the important part. But of course, we do got the college football playoffs. Those are set up, and I did want to, we were going to go through, we won't spend too much time on each of these bowl games, but we will kind of touch on each of the SEC bowls. But college football playoffs, of course, you got Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame. That's your top four. A&M came in at 5th. Oklahoma, surprisingly, at 6th. I was shocked to see that. Florida State at 7, and you have Cincinnati at 8. Just for you, did you think the committee got it right with the top 4?
I don't necessarily know if they got it right, but I think it was pretty obvious that was how it was going to end up. I mean, unless Notre Dame lost 70-0 or something to Clemson, I think they were still going to make it as the 4 seed, and obviously I don't think anybody wanted to have, then they were going to drop at least to the 4, because I don't think anybody wanted to see Clemson and Notre Dame play again right after literally a week after they had just played. I mean, you can make the case that a year like this is where you should expand it to 8, go to 8 teams and then see what happens. I think A&M had made a great case. The only game they lost was to Alabama. I think that they certainly could have been there. But you just, like I said, it seemed pretty obvious that A&M, like I said, that the committee had their 4 teams and that wasn't going to change. But the one that Cincinnati, the fact that they kept dropping and they were saying, well, we just keep dropping them because they haven't played. But I'm like, but Ohio State went like 3 weeks without playing or something, and nobody dropped them. And I think they should have been higher. I mean, that's another game I'm looking forward to, that Cincinnati-Georgia game. I had Florida playing Cincinnati, and then I had Georgia in the where did I have Georgia? I had Georgia playing in the Orange Bowl. And I will say this about A&M. I really was hoping it was going to be A&M and Oklahoma, because I wanted that old, the old school Big 12, Southwest Conference matchup. And then you set the over-under at like 100 and see, and see what happens. And I really thought that's what I really thought was, that's what I really thought we were going to get in that game in the Cotton Bowl was that matchup. And Texas A&M and North Carolina would be a good game. That's another one you could probably set the over-under at 100. But I think A&M will win that game because I think their defense can stop North Carolina. But going back to your thing, the playoff, like I said, you can make a case for at least 6 teams, but I think in the end, like I said, the committee had their mind pretty much set, I think, on what they thought the top 4 teams were going to be. So I don't know that it would have made a difference, at A&M or anybody else. So we'll just leave it at that. It's that, I said, if they were ever going to go to an 8-team playoff, this would have been the year, just because of the way 2020 has been. And, you have some teams playing 5 games and some teams playing 11 games and all that. So, but yeah, I'll say for the most part, they got it, they got it right.
Yeah, I kind of, we talked about this off air. I kind of went into it with the feeling that we were going to get these 4. Now, when Notre Dame did get blown out by Clemson like they did on Saturday, I was thinking maybe there's an outside shot for A&M. But I think just the fact is that you would know A&M would play Alabama in that first game, and that we saw those 2 teams play. I believe had that game even been like a 10 or 14-point game, but it was competitive most of the way, you could have had a better case for A&M getting in. But the simple fact is you lose, I think, 52-28 to Alabama. I mean, that hurt them. I mean, the way they looked against Alabama, I think, hurt them. Not necessarily that they got beat by Alabama already. It's just the fact is that they just got blown out. I mean, yeah, we might say we expect Notre Dame to get blown out or Alabama to have an easy time with Notre Dame, but we haven't seen that yet. We don't know for sure. So I think that's what's the biggest thing that may have hurt A&M in that situation.
I think so. I think you make a great point that, we've seen that game already. And, and granted, when they played the first time, I think Alabama still had Jalen Waddle, but still, as you said, we've seen that game. They lost by 4 touchdowns. So yeah, I think that's ultimately what the committee just went with. So, but like I said, now they just got to, hope. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you just hopefully think that, it'll be extra motivation for them against Alabama. I mean, I don't see them. Me personally, I don't see them staying, within 17 points of them. But we'll see here in about 10 days. So at least we hope, unless something unforeseen happens and the games get pushed back for some reason. But
yeah, let's hope not on that part of things. And I got to say this too: watching Alabama and Florida on Saturday night. Now, look, you're going to have to score a lot of points, obviously, if you're going to beat Alabama. But they're not unbeatable if you have a good enough offense that can put up a lot of points. We saw what Florida did. And look, early in the year, Ole Miss put a bunch of points on too, 48 in that game. Alabama won 63-48. I don't think Notre Dame has the team to do that. Ian Book is a terrific quarterback. I believe he is probably the most underrated top quarterback in college football. We hear about Trevor Lawrence, Matt Jones, Trask, you hear about Zach Wilson, all these guys, Justin Fields. Ian Book is a very good college quarterback, and I don't think he gets his just due. But they don't have the playmakers on the outside. They're really good at tight end, but they don't have the playmakers on the outside. And just they're not built to be in a high-scoring game like that. But, look,
now,
Ohio State.
I agree. I agree 100%.
Now, Ohio State offensively we'll see how Justin Fields, he looked like he was banged up against Northwestern, but if they were to beat Clemson, I think them and Ohio State, and they look to be maybe get some players back. And then, of course, Clemson. We know Clemson plays well against Alabama. Even in games they've lost in years past with Dabo Swinney there, they have competed well. So I'm just saying, I'm going ahead. I'll let everybody know. I'm putting Alabama in the national championship game. But Clemson or Ohio State, they have offenses that can compete. And Clemson is a better team than Florida. I'm not going to sit here and say Ohio State's better than Florida. I don't know because of the lack of games and the lack of playing top competition. But peak Clemson versus peak Alabama, peak Clemson can hang and beat them. I mean, heck, I picked Clemson to win the title at the beginning of the year. So I say all of that to say Alabama is a dynamic, unstoppable offense, but if they meet up with another offense that's just as good or has playmakers, they can be beat. I mean, in a high-scoring game, and Florida showed that, I think.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And you think about the kind of shift, it's kind of the shift in thinking with Nick Saban, going from, a lot of these coaches, the old school coaches, defense wins games. But, if Saban even made the comment this year, it's like, you want to have a good defense, but then if you score 50 points every game, then your odds of winning, increase dramatically, where it's, where we've got like the pinball, what we used to call like the Big 12 style of football, basically all over college football now. And like I said, I don't think anybody, Notre Dame definitely could not outscore Alabama. And he said Clemson, I think Clemson and Alabama would be a heck of a game. And I think even Ohio State and Alabama would be a really good game too. But I think the game everybody wants is probably Clemson and Alabama, even though it'd be like for the fifth time or something like that. But they've kind of separated themselves as the two top teams in college football right now, and we'll see if there's any drop off. Because Lawrence is not. I don't think Lawrence is coming back to school next year. So even if it's the Jaguars or the Jets, where he ends up, but and of course leave it to the Jets to mess up the whole first pick thing yesterday by going out and beating the Rams, but which I couldn't believe that one either. But yeah, like I said, I think it would be that would be like a classic college football championship, and it would probably get that, like you were talking about, that 51 to 48 kind of score too. So
yeah, and honestly, I don't see it because look, the Heisman stuff, you expect, I think, somebody from Alabama to win it. Maybe Kyle Trask has an outside chance if the Alabama guys cancel each other out. I know Dabo Swinney was kind of pushing for Trevor Lawrence on Saturday to get it. We know Trevor Lawrence is not getting the award just because, I think the lack of games that he played because he missed about a month this year. But if they go in that game and he's going to get the Heisman Trophy winner, Trevor Lawrence is the kind of guy, too, so, hey, I want to show why I should have been the Heisman Trophy winner, why I am the best player in college football. So that's going to be an interesting thing when those two match up as well.
Yeah, and I think, and I do think it's kind of a raw deal, I hate to say. But, I mean, we, full disclosure, we do a Heisman poll every week here at Last Word, and it does seem weird that, Lawrence, in all honesty, probably should win the Heisman, but and most likely he's not going to because he missed their highest profile game, against Notre Dame, and they lost, and then he missed a couple of games in there, and it'd be pretty. It's kind of, I don't want to say sad, but the basically COVID or whatever, this crazy season probably cost him a chance at winning the Heisman that he probably should have won. Then everybody pretty much thought he was going to win in September when the season started.
Yeah, absolutely. I had him. I think I had him as my Heisman winner before the year. So yeah, it probably would be different if he hadn't missed in 4 weeks because, like I said, they had the 2 games he missed because he had COVID. Clemson was off during that time. Then he had the Florida State game that got canceled when they arrived in Tallahassee. Pretty much a month there that they missed out. So looking at these SEC bowl games and going through them real quickly. Just going to go through them in order, real quick and touch on them just a little bit, not go too much detail here, but we get started this Saturday with the first one, and that's to say these games are scheduled. I guess I need to say that they are scheduled.
Yeah, card subject to change, yeah.
So you do have the Gasparilla Bowl between South Carolina at 2-8 and UAB at 6-3. Of course, as we're recording this, it is looking like Bill Clark has pulled his name out of the hat for the Auburn job, and he's done a great job there at UAB. They just won their second Conference USA title with him their head coach. He had to rebuild the program from the ground up. He's done a fantastic job there. Look, South Carolina 2-8. I don't really think a win here salvages the season, but hey, you get to go play another game. Just interesting matchup here with UAB and South Carolina.
Yeah, no, I think UAB. I think it could be a bad. I don't know. Overall, it could be a bad year in bowl games for the SEC.
I'm with you.
I think the top tier teams will probably do all right, but I think. Yeah, let's face it, honestly, in any other year, South Carolina wouldn't be going to a bowl game. And honestly, neither would Kentucky either at 4-6. But, it is what it is. And as you said, it's the thing about the bowl games, you get that extra month, those extra 15 practices or whatever it is, and, you start building for next year. But, no, frankly, I was shocked that UAB went into Marshall and beat Marshall last weekend, but no, I think UAB. I would say UAB wins this one probably 10 points, maybe even more. So,
yeah.
But, as I said, this is be 0-1 for the SEC there.
Yeah, I think UAB is going to win that one too. We have a couple of them on December 30th. We had the Music City Bowl between number 15 Iowa, who's 6-2, and Missouri at 5-5. Which, of course, on Monday night, Iowa had to shut down football.
Iowa, yeah.
I had to shut down football activity, so we'll see if the game does get played on the 30th. I mean, we've got 9 days until that game is to be played when we're recording this on Monday. That Iowa, they even have Iowa listed as a 15-point favorite there. Now, this one is interesting. If they do play it, I could see Missouri winning this game because Missouri has played well this year. I was shocked they got beat like they did against Mississippi State this past Saturday because Missouri has been playing pretty well this year. And I think Eli Drinkwitz, if he doesn't get SEC Coach of the Year, he certainly should be up there in the conversation. But I probably would lean Iowa on this one, but I wouldn't be shocked if Missouri pulled out a win if they do get this one played.
Right. Now, you're exactly right. Drinkwitz should be the SEC coach. The first part of the year, I thought it should be Sam Pittman at Arkansas, but then you think about the job that he's done at Missouri to even get them to this point. And and again, Missouri's a team who can score a ton of points, and I don't know that Iowa can keep up with them. But then again, I think Iowa's defense will probably, kind of what we were talking about earlier. I think Iowa's defense could probably slow down Missouri enough to win. And like I said, I think they could be a sleeper. I don't think Iowa wins by 15 points, but I think it could be a sleeper good game there. But I definitely got to pick Iowa on that one.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. The Cotton Bowl Classic, which I hope it lives up to that last part of that name. Number 7, Florida at 8-3 at number 6, Oklahoma 8-2. Florida is actually listed right now as recorded on Monday as a 3-point favorite here. All I'm saying, I know Kyle Pitts won't be playing this game for Florida, but Florida has put points up when he's not been on the field. Kadarius Toney is a weapon out on the outside for Kyle Trask. And Oklahoma's playing really well. Oklahoma's one of the teams you would not want to play right now. This was a tough one to pick because I can wrestle both ways on this one. I'm just going to be an SEC homer, and I'm going to say Florida wins a close one, a wild, high-scoring game. The over-under's got to be close to 80 or 90 points. Maybe not that high, but it's going to be a high-scoring over-under. But
I agree. I think if Pitts was playing, I think Florida wins fairly easily. You talked about, we talked about teams, lighting up the scoreboard. You think about Florida getting 46 against Alabama on Saturday. Like I said, Spencer Rattler and the Sooners, they struggled at the first part of the year, but as you said, they've really come on here in the last few weeks. And I said they're one of those, we always say in college basketball, team peaking at the right at tournament time. That's kind of what Oklahoma is doing right now. But like I said, I agree with you. I think it could be a really, really good game. But yeah, I'm gonna go Florida on this, and I'm gonna be an SEC homer as well.
Hey, I have never shied away from my SEC bias. Even on our private chats we have over everybody at Last Word, y'all know good and well I have mentioned my SEC bias when we get started talking about stuff. There's sometimes, if you ask me, I would say the 4 best teams in the SEC should have been in the playoff, and that's just all we need to do. But anyways, on New Year's Eve, we have 2 games. The Armed Forces Bowl, which this would have been the perfect bowl game for Army to be in, but I'm glad they're going to get in their bowl game and play West Virginia as it looks. But number 24 Tulsa at 6-2, who lost to Cincinnati in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. They'll be playing at Mississippi State, who, look, I think Mississippi State has played better toward the end of the year. They looked really bad against Auburn, but even in their losses to Ole Miss, Georgia, they looked much better, and then they had a really good performance against Missouri this past Saturday. They did finish 3-7. Tulsa's a 2.5-point favorite here. You know, I'm going to go with the upset, Kevin. I think Mississippi State's going to win this. I think they're going to get a win here and get a little momentum going into the offseason.
Yeah, they you could throw Kentucky in there too. How they looked awful, you know, going back to the Kentucky game with Mississippi State. It was the first time a Mike Leach coach team didn't score an offensive point in his 20-year coaching career. But as you said, they're another team that's kind of, you know, they've had some well-documented struggles this year, you know, with players leaving and everything, but they seem to have kind of righted the ship. And like I said, I think I was really, really impressed with Tulsa in that AAC game. I was flipping back and forth between that and the SEC championship. I'm going to pick Tulsa just because I think, again, their defense is really, really strong, and Mississippi State has been really turnover prone at times this year. And then I'll say that, and then Mississippi State will win by like 3 touchdowns. But anyway, I'm going to pick Tulsa on that one.
Yeah, I maybe have a different opinion if I could have actually watched some of that game, but I couldn't because I do not have ABC at this time. And I hope
hashtag thanks Dish Network.
Yeah. So, thank you, Dish, for all the great things you do for college football fans out there. Everybody's appreciative of what you do down here in Dothan, Alabama.
I lived that. You know, I talked off the air. I lived that for about 6 weeks here here in Lexington. The TV station I worked for, we were off Dish Network for about 7 weeks, and they ironically put us back on. We got back on the air the day after the Kentucky Derby. So, you know, the day that everybody wants to watch NBC, you know, it didn't happen. But anyway, that was we go on about on that forever. But I guess we'll move on to the Texas Bowl now. I have no idea who the sponsor. Macari. I have to look up Macari. But anyway, so.
Yeah, Texas Bowl, Arkansas at TCU, which Arkansas has got some good history here. And I'm sure if I'm wrong on this, the internet will correct me, but I believe under Brett Bielema, they beat Texas. And I think this is the game where Brett Bielema became infamous with his comments where someone asked him what it was like to beat Texas, and he said borderline erotic. I don't think Sam Pittman's going to say that if they beat TCU here.
I had blocked that image out of my brain now, but now anyway. But he's back. I guess he's back in coaching now too, right? He's the new head coach at Illinois, I think, replacing Lovie Smith. But yeah, no, you said as we just said a minute ago, the first half of this year, if Sam Pittman would have been my SEC coach of the year, but I just don't see them beating TCU in this one. I think, you know, TCU, they're one of those teams when they're good, they're really good, and then if they don't show up, then Arkansas could beat them. But I'm going to go TCU on this one.
Yeah, Arkansas was 3-3, but they've now lost 4 in a row. But they lost that really close one to Missouri, which wasn't one of the best games in the SEC all year. And I will say this, Felipe Franks has played really well this year for them, and I would like to see him go out on a high note. But I'm in agreement. I think TCU does win this one. So, but, you know, we'll see. But I don't think, like I said, I'll go back to what I just said. Sam Pittman's not going to say what Brett Bielema said. I can pretty much guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But we go with, this is the one draws interest for me. On New Year's Day, we can open up today with the Auburn Tigers playing at Northwestern, the 2 battle of cats here. Of course, Auburn went 6-4 this year. Northwestern went 6-2, lost to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Who knows if Kevin Steele's the interim head coach? Who knows if he'll be the head coach by this time? The way the Auburn coaching search is going, who knows? Northwestern, they are a 3.5-point favorite here. And look, My Auburn people, they're going to get mad at me for this, but I'm just going to say, I think Northwestern's going to win this game. Auburn's got too many distractions. I like what Northwestern can do defensively. And Chad Morris will probably be the offensive coordinator for the game for Auburn, so that is a mark against them as well. So I'm going to go with Northwestern.
Well, sorry, interwebs and Auburn fans. I have to agree. You see what Northwestern did to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Basically, kind of neutralized Justin Fields. Now, of course, the running back went crazy. But I just see Northwestern. I see Northwestern winning this in probably 7 to 10 points. Unfortunately, apologize to all the Auburn, the Tiger faithful down there. But I think Northwestern takes that one.
Yeah, I'll probably get some people saying I'm a closet Bammer after this podcast if anybody from Auburn listens to this show. So I'm used to it. So I've been called a closet Bammer, a Barner, and all that good stuff. So it just works out either way. The Peach Bowl, this one's interesting. We talked about Florida and Oklahoma as the non-playoff games, especially with the SEC teams. This was going to be fun. Number 9, Georgia, playing they're playing against Cincinnati, who's 9-0 on the year. And, I think Georgia probably wins this game because I think Georgia is looking at this as, a message for next year with JT Daniels. You get him back. They played really, really well since he's taken over at quarterback, which I know Georgia fans have pretty much hated that because, why wasn't he playing earlier in the year? And I know Cincinnati is going to be charged up for this game because they want to prove that they should have been in the playoff, and beating a Georgia team would be a sign and a message to the committee as well. I think this is going to be actually a really close game. I don't think Georgia blows them out by any means. I think Cincinnati will try to prove they belong on the field with a team like Georgia. But I do think Georgia wins this in a very close game, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're doing what Cincinnati said is going to try to come out and say, look, we got hosed in the rankings and we should have been, higher than what we are. But at the same time, I agree with you. I think Georgia is kind of a thing for next year. Basically, okay, Florida got the SEC this year, but this is going to kind of be their way of saying, okay, we're going to be back. We're going to be back on top next year. But I think Georgia. I think this one has potential to be one of the better games of all the bowl games. I say Georgia wins a close one, maybe like 27-24, 24-21, something like that.
Yeah, and you got to think for next year with Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, you think Kadarius Toney would probably be gone as well. Florida's going to have to try to reload a little bit. I would have to say that Georgia should be the clear-cut favorite to win the East next year.
Right. If Kentucky doesn't, I'm kidding. No, we're not going to be.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to next. And before we jump into Kentucky's bowl game, I wanted to also talk to you first about Kentucky bringing a new offensive coordinator. Of course, they parted ways with Eddie Gran. I mean, Kentucky's offense, especially with the passing game, they're last in SEC in passing in less than total yards. I mean, 5th in rushing. So, I mean, they are a really good rushing team. So now they're going to bring in Liam Cohen. He's from the Rams as their offense coordinator and quarterback coach. Spent the last 3 years with the Rams. 18-19 assistant receivers coach, and then this year he was assistant quarterback coach. So, I mean, obviously you see that with the Rams, where he's coming from, McVay. Obviously a system where they do run the ball, so that will still, you would think, still be part of Kentucky's offense. But a little bit more, maybe more complex with the passing game. Just, overall, what was your thoughts on first Kentucky parting ways with Eddie Gran and now bringing in Liam Cohen as the new offensive coordinator?
Well, I mean, but as far as Grand, basically they the day after the South Carolina game where Kentucky won 41-18, they held a press conference. They just made an announcement that they were parting ways with Eddie Gran, their quarterback coach and offensive coordinator, or running back coach, and then Darren Henshaw, who's quarterback's coach, and had been in Kentucky since 2016. I think it was time. Something had to be done. Despite the success Kentucky's been having on the field, the offense has been a bit of a mess. But 2 years ago you had Benny Snell to win. Basically just give Benny the ball and let him do his thing. And then last year it was Lynn Bowden. Let him do his thing. You have those really two kind of dynamic players. It masks a lot of problems that you have with your offense. And for whatever reason, with Terry Wilson coming back from injury, because there were some games he looked great, some games not so much. Just something was off with his offense like the whole season, with the exception of maybe the Ole Miss game, and that might have had more to do with the Ole Miss defense. But no, I think it was past time. Gran supposedly was offered the offensive coordinator job at Georgia last year after the season, but turned it down. Depending on who you asked, turned it down, or was never asked, or was never offered the job, and came back. But supposedly this had been decided about halfway through the season, halfway to 2/3 through the season, that they were going to move in a different direction. The Graham would be out, but I'm good with it. I think Cohen is a great hire. You look at his history. He was a great quarterback at the University of Massachusetts. Played Victor Cruz, was one of his teammates. Former New York Giant, and he was one of the first people tweeted about Cohen getting hired. He said, "I can't wait to come to Lexington and check out a ball game," kind of thing. As I said, he's not the pass happy. I think I've had this conversation. There's people, the air raid offense kind of got started in Lexington back in the late '90s. Hal Mummy was here, and Mike Leach was the offensive coordinator, and Tim Couch was quarterback. And some years later, there's people, there's a lot of people in Kentucky's fan base. They think that's the only offense that you can run. That's the only offense Kentucky should run. But Stoops is more that old school football guy where he wants a good running game. So I think Cohen is going to be somewhere in between, as you said. With Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers and those guys, they do run the ball a lot. But then you have Jared Goff, who has it's more of a pro style. It's going to be more of a pro style offense, which I think is going to be good for Kentucky because, as I said, they needed to change. Not just, as I said, we're getting some good results on the field, but it's hard to get excited about winning a game 14-10 or 10-7 or something because the offense has just not been good. And I think it's a great hire. I'm excited about it. And whenever he gets here, he's still going to be with the Rams until after the playoff game is over, or until they get down in the playoffs. And as I said, he does like to run the ball. You think about, you have Chris Rodriguez coming back next year, Kawasi Smoke, who should be healthy. They can do a lot of damage to those two guys next year. But anyway, I'm good with it. I think it's a great hire. I'm very excited. And the thing about it is, it's brought some excitement to the program that had kind of been lacking over the last couple of years or so, at least especially where the offense goes.
Yeah, and so when we look at going into the bowl game, what is their plan coordinator-wise? Who's going to be the offensive coordinator for them?
Marrow, who's their, he's the recruiting guru, but he's also the tight ends coach. I think he's going to be calling. I think he's the one that's going to be calling the plays, which means we're going to see hopefully a lot of throwing to the tight end, which is what Kentucky fans have been wanting for years. You go back to T.J. Conrad. He would have one game where he would catch like 6 passes and 2 touchdowns, and then the next 4 games he wouldn't catch a pass. And then you have Justin Riggs and Keaton Upshaw, 2 really good tight ends this year, who late in the year started clicking with Wilson. But like I said, Vince Marrow is probably going to be calling the plays. I think Stoops is probably going to be helping out some. But it should be fun. Like I said, I'm really excited about the Gator Bowl. Kentucky played their, this will be Kentucky's fifth straight bowl game. It'd be the second time. Coach Stoops is the only coach in Kentucky history to take a team to 5 straight bowl games. But Kentucky went from 2006 to 2010. Rich Brooks did the first 4, and Joker Phillips did the last one. And the first bowl game that Kentucky played in was the Gator Bowl back in 2016. They lost to Georgia Tech. But like I said, I'm excited. I thought, and people around the program were pretty sure they were going to go to the Music City Bowl and play either Iowa or Wisconsin. And the Iowa matchup would have been interesting because that's Stoops' alma mater. But as we understood it, the Gator Bowl offered to Missouri, and Missouri said no. And so when they did that, they said, well, then they offered it to Kentucky, and Kentucky was like, shoot, yeah, we'll go. So, and they're playing a very good North Carolina State team. I think again, this could be a really good game. Like I said, I think Kentucky kind of comes into it with nothing to lose. Nobody, at 4-6 and being when the line first came out, Kentucky was a 3-point favorite, and that's switched now. North Carolina State's, I think, a 3.5 to 4-point favorite. Like I said, Kentucky has nothing to lose. They can just come out and play and have fun and try to get the victory. And so I think this one has potential to be a good game and could go down to the wire. I'll be a homer. I'll pick Kentucky to win. So.
Well, and I'll keep it short, but I think Kentucky's going to win too. And I'm going to say this, and no disrespect really to NC State, but I'm not overly impressed also with their 8-3, because when you look at that 8-3 out of the ACC, they did not play Clemson or Notre Dame. So I would think, obviously, that would be 2 more losses. They did play Miami pretty close, and they got blown out by North Carolina, the other 2 good teams out of the ACC. But I'm not overly impressed or overly worried about NC State in this game. I think Kentucky and them are actually comparable and on the same level. So I'm going to pick Kentucky in this one as well. We got 2 more, and of course these are on January the 2nd. We got the Outback Bowl between Ole Miss and Indiana, which I think Indiana's upset. They felt like they were snubbed out of one of the New Year's Six bowl games. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin. I think we're going to probably see a lot of offense in this one as well between these 2 teams. Indiana, they are a 6.5-point favorite. But as people do know me, I am a big fan of Lane Kiffin. And he is my favorite coach in college football, and I do not apologize for that one bit. So I am going to pick Ole Miss to win this one.
Yeah, no, I think, especially you think if Indiana still had Michael Penix, what a fun matchup, what a fun game this is. And I still think it's going to be a fun game. This could be one of those, somebody scores 40 plus points to have to win. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to pick Ole Miss, and kind of an upset, but the Ole Miss seems to be playing, especially these last few weeks, have been playing a whole lot better, and we know they can put points on the board. And I don't know, since Penix got hurt, if Indiana hasn't been the same team without him in the lineup, and I don't know. I mean, their defense is spectacular. It's really, really good. But I don't know. But going up against that Ole Miss offense, I don't know they can score enough points to keep up with them.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting part of the Indiana quarterback side of things. And then finally, the last of the SEC games, the Orange Bowl between number 5 A&M, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, and North Carolina, number 13. 8-1 versus 8-3. A&M is a 7-point favorite here. This should be fun. With North Carolina, I've watched them a little bit this year, and Sam Howell's a terrific talent quarterback, and Matt Brown has done a good job. And I'm sure that'll get talked about, his record versus Texas A&M when he was the head coach at Texas. But I'm going to pick A&M to win this one, because it's kind of like what I was talking about with Cincinnati. I do feel like A&M wants to prove a point to the committee that they should have been in the 14 playoff. I'm going to pick A&M here, but this game should be close. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, as I said earlier, I think the matchup I was hoping for was Texas A&M and Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. I think that would have been great to match up those old rivals. But no, I agree with you. I think this is another one. Okay, go to 50. First one to 50 wins, and but I think Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M, as you said, they have a point to prove, and I think they'll come out. All firing all cylinders, and I say they win. I say they beat North Carolina at least a couple touchdowns.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting, fun bowl season, which there's all the other bowls, non-SEC stuff too as well. It should be fun. We touched on a couple of those there early on. And Kevin, we have hit the 45-minute mark on our conversation. So it's been good.
We were going to try to go short this time, but anyway.
Well, for the listeners out there that need to know, a lot of times when I have you on, we have extended conversations once I hit turn off the record button. So it's kind of really not actually for me and you, not too long, about the same conversation we normally would have, but longer recorded for everybody listening, which it's been a great conversation talking these bowl games in Kentucky there to you as well. And, of course, if the listeners wanted to follow you online, where can they find you and all the great work you're doing over at Last Word on College Football?
It's well, Last Word on CFB. That's the Twitter our Twitter handle, and then mine is the cleverly titled at Kevin McGuffey, because I think I told you this story probably every time I've been on. When I first joined Twitter, I had like a couple of nicknames that I tried to use, and then some form of like 18, because that's the TV station I worked for, and they were all taken. So I was like, well, crap. So I'll use my name and see if that works. And it did. So, but anyway, it's at Kevin McGuffey, and come check it out. Like I said, if you do, you'll see lots of tweets about sports and football and music. You might see some pro wrestling. It just depends on what, and you'll see lots of pictures of my kids. But anyway, so, but the proud dad, and posting pictures of the kids when they do stuff. But yeah, no, like I said, thank you for having me on again. It's always great to talk to you. And like I said, we just, we probably could just sit around and just talk all day, talk all day and all night. And sometimes we do, I think. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. We probably have some long conversations outside of what we're recording, but it's always great having you on the show, Kevin. Do appreciate the time, and also, of course, I hope you and your family have a great holiday season, and I appreciate you coming on, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Oh, definitely, anytime, Phillip, and thank you. And like I said, I hope you have y'all have a great holiday as well. And like I said, we can all hope that 2021 that things get better, or hopefully some semblance of normalcy, that we can have some for football wise, hopefully we can have spring football come April. So that would be a good first step. But like I said, I'm really looking forward to some of these bowl games. That time where you get the bowl games and the NFL playoffs is probably about my favorite. Other than March Madness is my favorite time of year. But of course, Kentucky's basketball team is struggling so badly right now. It's just painful. As a friend of mine said, who would have thought that on December 21st that the Kentucky football team would have more wins than the basketball team by a significant margin? But that's just, for whatever reason, that's a whole nother conversation. This group of one and dones under Coach Cal they just haven't got it figured out yet. But it's only December. There's still time, I guess.
There you have it. We'll see how that works out for him, too. But anyways, like I said, Kevin, thanks for coming on the show, and always a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. Hope you enjoyed those two conversations. A lot of fun this week on the podcast. Thanks to Matt and Kevin for jumping on, and a lot of good college football stuff there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you stay along for the whole ride on this week's show. Hope everybody has a great Christmas, holidays this weekend. Hope everybody has a good time with their family and friends and all that good stuff. Be back next week to preview more in depth the college football playoffs. The goal will be next week. Don't know if this is going to happen, but to have somebody that covers each team that's going to be playing in the playoffs. So the goal is 4 guests next week. So that's going to be a really massive show here on the podcast. See if I can pull it off. We'll see. But I can keep you updated on that. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the podcast on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. More great audio coming out next week. Hope everybody has a great week. Have a great Christmas, great holidays. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Talkin' SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin' SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.